Welcome to ELPC Thinks webinar. My name is Susan Mudd, and I'm a senior policy advocate for the Environmental Law and Policy Center. ELPC Thinks is where we bring experts, environmental leaders, and community partners together to forge new strategies for progress. We're very excited to be talking today about an issue that ELPC has been working on for quite a while: electric school buses. A quick heads up, we will be recording this webinar and streaming live on Facebook to share it for those who were not able to join us at this time. School buses. The reality is, those dirty, diesel, noisy yellow school buses everyone sees daily on our roads harm children's health and contribute to both local air pollution and climate problems. They exacerbate asthma, now the #1 chronic disease among US children, lead to school day absences, parents missing work, and belch out greenhouse gases. For students who can't walk or bike to school, school buses are the safest way to get there. And now there's a better option than diesel and other fossil fueled buses for the 25 million children bused each day: electric. Transitioning this nearly 500,000 vehicle fleet, which carries more people than other public transit, to electric holds great promise. Electric school buses are quiet, don't smell, don't emit dangerous fumes, and help to decarbonize our economy. Currently, they face obstacles, largely the upfront price premium. But zero-emission electric school buses are now getting much needed attention in Congress and from the president, with potential real federal funding for the first time now pending in the bipartisan infrastructure and other bills. Over the last few years, ELPC has led efforts to bring electric school buses to the attention of Midwestern schools and policymakers, and to seek ways to overcome the barriers to their wide-scale adoption. There are now electric school buses operating in Michigan, Indiana, Illinois, Minnesota, and plans for some in Iowa and Ohio. Nationwide, there are hundreds. Today's ELPC Thinks will combine the lived experiences of a public school transportation director implementing that change in our region with a representative of the company that has rolled out hundreds of these buses and will soon be manufacturing them in the Midwest. So let's get to it. First, we're going to hear from Ann Whedon and then from Orville Thomas. If you want to ask a question, please click the Q&A icon on your screen and type in your question. You can do that at any time, and we'll get to as many questions as we can over the time we have. If there are any we can't get to during the webinar, we will do our best to get back to you with answers afterwards. Now, Ann Whedon. Ann Whedon is Director of Transportation for Oxford Community Schools in Michigan. Ann began her career with Oxford Community Schools in 1994 as a school bus driver and has been their transportation director since 2014. Oxford is one of 7 school districts that are part of the Michigan Association for Pupil Transportation's electric school bus program. Through that program, there are now 17 electric school buses taking students to school in Michigan. Oxford received 2 of those electric buses in December of 2019. Both were put into service in January 2020. Ann has driven Oxford's Lion electric school buses. Ann, ball to you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm excited to be here today. I'm happy to share my experiences with all of you regarding our electric buses, and especially for those of you who are thinking of purchasing school buses for your fleets, whether it's through public schools or private schools. And happy to answer any questions you have.
Ann, can you tell us a little bit about why you decided to seek electric school buses for Oxford?
At the time, we had a very old fleet. Most of our buses were 2007 or older, so they were the old pre-emission diesels. I was invited by MAPT, and in particular, Howard McDashney approached me about joining the MAPT pilot project, which involved getting electric school buses in Michigan. And I went to my business manager and to our superintendent. They were both on board, readily on board and excited to become a participant in that program. Through the program, we did a lot of investigative work, looking into different vehicles. Lion Electric was very involved in having buses here in Michigan. They're available for us to be able to drive, or not drive, but to ride and to look at. We also were involved with Bluebird at the time when they're were initially bringing their electric buses on. And we did a lot of research looking into charging stations, what it was going to take for the districts to be able to even put electric buses in their fleets, as far as like they're having to upgrade their infrastructure and everything. I'm sorry.
No, we're glad to hear what it takes in real life to make this happen. Because we know it's not just one of those overnight fall out of bed things. How have the buses performed, Dan, compared to the rest of your fleet?
The buses have been very reliable. We've had one bus that we had to replace a battery pack on, but we were still able to use that bus and put it into service while we were waiting on that battery replacement. We did the buses that we ended up ordering through MAPT have 4 battery packs in them, and they will operate fine. They're 125-mile range buses, and they'll operate fine for our circumstances with only 3 batteries. It worked out fine. They've been very reliable. We've had a few minor issues, nothing major. And the drivers that drive those buses love them. They don't want to go back to, they don't want to go back to the old diesels. And a lot of our fleet right now, we're using gasoline buses, and they still prefer to drive their electric buses. They love them.
Good to know. And Anne, I'm wondering, so it sounds like the buses can handle the range of your routes in Oxford. How are they handling the winter, which is something we all are concerned about in the upper Midwest?
We have no problems with them in the winter. The buses we ordered do have the Pro heaters. So they're not electric heat, they are Pro heat, diesel Pro heat. They don't use a lot of diesel through the winter months, but they heat up fine. We've not had any issues. There was some questions when we first got them, and when we were doing a lot of the investigative work regarding the regenerative braking that is equipped on those buses. And like for winter driving, for skids or anything like that, or losing control. And we've not had any problems with that. We've not, the regen braking, you can turn it off if you want to. Neither one of my drivers have turned it off. They use it continuously, and we get a lot of snow up here.
Great. Let's now turn to Orville Thomas. I'm sure there'll be questions for both of you. We want to hear from Orville next. Orville Thomas is Director of Government Relations for Lion Electric. Orville went from being a TV news reporter to a political and public policy strategist, with the last 10 years focused on transportation and equity, an important consideration with school buses. Now Lion Electric's Director of Government Relations, Orville is working on transitioning the country's medium and heavy duty fleets towards zero emission vehicles. This means helping provide communities with the funding necessary for all electric school and transit buses, all electric delivery and drayage trucks, and all electric urban utility fleets. Orville, you're up.
Hey everyone, it's good to see some familiar faces in the chat. Excited to be with you, Susan and Anne, on this panel, and what a day to do it. We're hearing that there might be an agreement on the budget reconciliation bill, which would allow for the transportation and infrastructure bill to move, which means that, you know, by the end of this week, if the votes go the way that we hope, we might see up to $10 billion in federal funding available for electric school buses. So thank you. You know, I know Susan and your organization have been critical on this help. And, you know, everyone who's an advocate, or in Anne's case, is activating and actually utilizing these buses to show the data that it works, you know, give yourselves a round of applause. You know, as Susan said, I'm a former news reporter, so I love to tell these stories of school districts like Anne's and, you know, what they're doing to make sure that kids are riding in very clean and safe school buses. And when we go and do ride and drives or have these opportunities to talk to elected officials and policymakers, it is incredible to see just where they have come in the past couple of years. And for me to be in this position the past couple of months, to really get a sense of how much they want to do to, build on the foundation of federal funding. And so what we're seeing now are states radically moving towards post VW funding, the Volkswagen settlement, into how they can themselves prop up electric school buses in their own communities. I know that Anne in Michigan, we're part of a group with Clean Fuels Michigan that's going to ask the state government to dedicate $100 million for electric infrastructure and for medium and heavy duty vehicles. And we probably didn't have that same conversation a couple of months ago, much less a couple of years ago. So it's great to see that the people that are on this call have really done such great work to set up networks and political strategies and to build up the momentum for electric school bus implementation.
Thanks, Orville, for those opening remarks. We're really excited, as you can imagine, to hear about the potential federal funding. Of course, we timed this webinar precisely for that reason, right? Wish we could claim that. Can you tell us a little bit about how Lion Electric sees the future of electric vehicle manufacturing in the Midwest? And clearly, all of us in Illinois are excited about the fact of Lion's factory to be building electric school buses and other electric vehicles here. But can you give us a little perspective on that?
Yeah, so a little background. Lion is going to be building or is building and is ready to be completing our manufacturing facility just outside of Chicago in Joliet, Illinois. When done, it will be the largest medium and heavy duty EV manufacturing plant on the continent. It will produce about 20,000 medium heavy duty electric vehicles annually when the production line is ramped up, and it has a space of just shy of 1 million square feet. So that's a gigantic, opportunity for the Midwest to see growth in, green tech and clean tech jobs. And we see it not just as Illinois, but really forming a backbone all through the Midwest of an EV manufacturing, gold rush in that sense. It's going to be great because then there's going to be suppliers and the supply chain is going to want to move into that area. And it's going to build upon the history of the Midwest in terms of automotive manufacturing. There are so many jobs that can be created and that can be transitioned from internal combustion engines to electric vehicles. And we're seeing it start already, with some of the light duty manufacturers like Ford and GM. And so for us to be part of that kind of movement in the Midwest and to be able to, really address the medium and heavy duty market where the emissions are disproportionately greater than the amount of vehicles that we have on the road is really an opportunity for Lion to invest in that region and to also invest in the marketplace, because we just think that there are going to be so many more opportunities for states to fund fleet transitions for garbage trucks, for drayage, for delivery, and especially for electric school buses. I think that is the one that everyone sees as being the catalyst to move the medium and heavy duty market towards all electric.
Thanks, Orville. So a question actually for both of you about the transition to electric. One question that comes up for Anne in the chat has to do with what the children's experience is. What are the students who get to ride your electric school buses in Oxford? What are they saying?
They are excited. When we initially received both of our buses, it happened to be on a Friday before Christmas break. And after we'd gotten our MSP inspections and everything, we were able to put those buses on the road. You would think that they had gotten Christmas early. Everyone who all of the students that were on those buses when they hit the road that day were excited. They just couldn't believe that they got the electric buses and that they were so fortunate. I have them on two routes that are basically in the village of Oxford. They service the downtown area and a few subdivisions surrounding our downtown. We also use those buses, and we did when we initially got them, and currently now to go to our vocational school that we use in Pontiac. So they travel round trip 30 miles at the middle of the day, bringing students to or back from that vocational school. We did that to get them more visibility, to have them in the community, not just in Oxford, but in our neighboring communities in Pontiac and in Lake Orion. And they like them, they enjoy them. They're quiet, so the students are quiet. So you're not having children, screaming at each other across the aisle, trying to, compensate for the motor noise from the diesels. The other thing in particular that we like about the Lion buses are the width. So the ones we have are 106 inches. I believe it's 106 inches wide. So that extra 6 inches is in the aisleway, which is amazing on those buses. Simply in accessibility to the emergency door. And the students across from each other, my drivers, have found that they have less issues with children like picking at each other across the aisle because of that extra 6 inches there. It's crazy, but it works.
For both of you, we hear that one of the advantages of electric school buses is the lower fuel and maintenance costs. So while there's the upfront barrier of the higher purchase price, we hear that there's less fuel and maintenance costs. And I wonder, Anne, if you could speak to that based on your experience, and Orville, if you could also address that in terms of what Lion's experiences are across the country.
Sure. What we've determined is with our electric rate, and we have a good electric rate. We broker our electricity through a third party. It doesn't come directly through DTE, who is our supplier. And with that good rate, we figure our buses, we average about 8 cents a mile for the electric buses that it's costing us, compared to about 37 cents a mile for gasoline buses and about 35 cents a mile for diesel buses. So that 8 cents gives us quite a savings over a period of a month or through a quarter. So in some of our calculations that we've done for the pilot project that we're required to do for Eagle, we figured in savings on average probably around $1,200 a month just from diesel cost. So that's a savings to the district, or excuse me, $1,200 a quarter, excuse me, not a month.
That's helpful. And Orville, how does that figure with what you're seeing with Lion's buses across the North America?
Yeah, I think generally what we've seen, and I texted, one of my colleagues about this to make sure I was correct, an 80% savings on fuel and a 60% savings on maintenance. I've been reading some reports, we're starting to see the first generation data studies come out with school districts like Oxford to really show that, yes, when you get past that upfront cost, it does do long-term parity. And in some instances, the electric school bus will be a long-term savings because we're pricing out 20 years of battery life. And then we're starting to see the technology improve or the utilities come into play where there might be some return on investment for the initial cost of the bus, where utilities might want to get involved and start realizing the vehicle to grid opportunity, or that the schools might want to think of what they can do if they swap out the batteries at some point during that 20 years and power classrooms or power facilities with a current electric school bus battery, because the cost of a new battery will go down and the range will obviously go up with technological advancements. So Anne, I'm just going to give you, a couple of years, and then hopefully we have this conversation again, and there's a lot more range, and there's opportunities for your battery to do many, many other things to help create sustainable classrooms in your school district, and allow for that long-term cost of electric versus diesel internal combustion to be well in favor of electric.
This gets to a related question that Beth Drucker and others have brought up, which has to do with creative financing models that can be used to get over the upfront cost hurdle. Clearly, where one can build in the fuel and maintenance costs, that can clearly be helpful. But Orville, are there other aspects you'd like to raise here in terms of creative financing?
Yeah, I think we've seen around the country that there are some creative financing opportunities. There's a school bus kind of project going on in Maryland with Highland Electric, where they're taking on a lot of the cost for that school district and then leasing back some of those buses to the school. And so what we're going to probably see, and there are others in the chat that can probably contribute more on the financing side, is that there's got to be creative thinking to make sure that schools aren't the only one footing the bill, especially as we see a delta in those costs between a normal diesel bus and an electric bus. Obviously, the bus on the electric side, the cost will go down as there are more investments from the federal government and as manufacturers get more involved and technology gets better. And we're hoping that parity happens within the next handful of years. But we have to have these opportunities where utilities or other financing companies come in and really take a 360-degree perspective on what an electric school bus is. It's not just a mode of transportation that's safe and efficient. It is a battery, it is an energy provider. So we could see some opportunities where school districts are being, asked to put energy back onto the grid and then allow themselves to make money off of their electric school bus investment.
Indeed. So other questions related to this financing. Let's touch a little bit on the potential for there finally to be federal money. As Orville mentioned earlier, and Anne knows intimately, the buses in Michigan and most of the electric school buses in many states, not so much California, have been largely financed to date through VW settlement funds. There have never been big federal funds for electric school buses. As Orville mentioned, there is money pending in the infrastructure bill, the so-called bipartisan infrastructure bill. And I wondered, Orville, if you'd like to comment a little bit further about where you see that and what we might be seeing in that in the near future.
Yeah, and it's great, on some of these questions, people are so advanced on their knowledge of what the bills were. So the president's initial Build Back Better infrastructure plan had about $20 billion to dedicate to electric school buses. A couple of senators, Senator Warnock, Senator Padilla, and a couple of congressional members signed on to throw what it was the Clean Commute for Kids Act, and that would have been $25 billion. So we're seeing great numbers, but politics happened, and what we ended up with in the final bipartisan infrastructure bill was up to $5 billion, with $2.5 billion explicitly set aside for electric buses and zero emission, and then another $2.5 billion pot that was set aside for low emissions and zero emissions. So we're hopeful that if all things pass, we'll see $5 billion in that infrastructure deal, and that would go through the Environmental Protection Agency, similar to what we have right now with DERA, but really targeting some disadvantaged communities to make sure that there is equity being built in to who gets electric school buses and who needs electric school buses. The budget reconciliation bill that we are talking about today, hopefully being agreed upon, has another $5 billion in it that would be for heavy duty electric vehicles. And we're hopeful that, that is a plus up for that electric school bus dollar money. So we're seeing and we're saying up to $10 billion, and that's a historic investment. Yes, it isn't the 20, it isn't the 25, but this is the start that I think manufacturers need. And this is a start that I think school districts can really rely on until their states start throwing additional funding on top of those dollars.
It's very encouraging to see this potential first federal funding that would really help get over this hurdle that we've got at the front that certainly Anne and Michigan school districts experienced. So some other questions that have been coming in on the chat. I wondered, and this actually goes to both of you. There are, as many of the listeners know, there's 3 sizes of school buses. This is a very practical question about what's in use. For many of us, we're used to seeing those big ones that are called Type C that have the bump out front. And then there's some that sort of look like transit buses that are Type D that are also big. And then there's the smaller ones that are often used for differently abled children called Type A. And are you finding that the types that you need are now on the market to meet Oxford's needs? And what types do you need? And then Orville, we're going to ask you about what Lion's making and what might be available in the future.
The buses, the Lion buses that we have are 71 passenger, conventional school buses, the Type C. We've not used any of the Type D, the transit buses at all. We don't have any in our district here. So the Type C was perfect fit for us. It was exactly what we needed. The size was fine. I'm not sure if Lion is making a larger bus with the 77 passenger Type C at this time. They could be. But they were fine with us, and with the 125-mile range, we've not had any issues. And this fall, one of my drivers even took his bus on a field trip to Metro Park with cross country team, and still had 20% battery life when he got back. He's not had any issue. Drove it in the morning on his regular run, and then took it for the afternoon. Did not have any problems with it. The size is absolutely fine. I would be interested in the future, maybe looking into some of the smaller Type A bus. It was I think it was what you said. Yeah. So we do have several mini buses in our fleet that we use strictly for special needs children, and I think it'd be great to have those buses more available for that purpose.
So, Ann set me up very perfectly. Yes, we have a Lion C. We also have a Lion D coming out next year, but we're really excited about our Lion A that is going through, inspections right now and should be available towards the start of 2022. And it is a population with special needs, and having an accessible bus that is 100% zero emission and 100% electric is going to be a great game changer and a much needed addition to these communities and these students. They unfortunately are breathing the worst air, still relying on those diesel buses. And it's about time that we really take this investment and throw it, to these communities and special needs students' ways, and making sure that it is an equal issue of equity and making sure that the health access is in that position, especially when it comes to transportation. And touched on something that, really made me chuckle, is that we're seeing these buses, really talk about, hey, do they have enough range for field trips? Do they have enough range for athletic events? And Ann said yes, but also we can't just stop by saying we have that range built in. We have to do better on the infrastructure side to make sure that parks have chargers that are accessible not just to light duty vehicles, but to medium and heavy duty vehicles. When you drive by a museum, you might see them putting in a charger for a light duty Tesla or a light duty car, but shouldn't they have, medium and heavy duty vehicle spaces that are equally accessible to having charging capabilities? And so that's the conversation that I think we need to start having with our, civic leaders, and making sure that they understand, if we want to get kids to these, schools or museums or, performance arts centers, we need to think creatively and let them know that there are electric school buses, so that when you are dropping children off and you have that 2-hour gap, maybe that they're seeing a movie or a performance, or, seeing like an astronomy show, that the bus is able to charge and not try to fit into a small spot, not designed for it.
Good point. So looking to the future, some listeners are asking about what you all see in terms of the future of your fleets, and the future of when we might see all electric school buses serving children in the Midwest and across the country. Ann, can you tell us a little bit about what plans you have to expand or the number of electric buses in your fleets? What will allow you to make that transition, and what do you need to be able to make that transition? And then Orville, we're interested in your perspective on when we can expect and hope for the entire U.S. fleet to transition.
So for me, part of the requirement using the Volkswagen funds was to replace the old diesel buses and having to destroy them and put them out of commission. So we recently pretty much converted our entire fleet to newer buses, but I kept one old diesel in the fleet. We can use it as a spare if needed. We're not using it a whole lot right now, but we kept it in case that requirement is still there in the future, or if we're able to use the DERA grant to replace and get another electric bus. We would definitely like to improve, expand on our fleet of electric. When we put our infrastructure in, we made sure that it's in an area where we can expand it, and we've already kind of set it up already so that it's not going to be a huge out-of-pocket cost for us to add another charging station if needed and another bus, hopefully in the near future. I'm probably not for a year or two, but definitely it's there and it's in our forethought.
And if we can help get some of those Michigan funds that Orville mentioned earlier, maybe it's in the nearer future than the further future.
Definitely something that we are looking to doing. We're not just going to settle with the two that we have and be done.
Great. Orville, you want to give a little look into the future?
Yeah, I'll gaze into my crystal ball at this point. So obviously, up to $10 billion is a huge investment. Unfortunately, it won't do the lion's share, and pun not intended with lion's share of what we need for a full fleet transition to electric all across the country. That is a small drop in the bucket. I think that we were calculating, and when Senator Padilla said 25 billion was his plan, it really meant that that could convert 25% of the school bus fleet across the country. So thinking through that, we're going to get up to 10% of the school bus fleet, hopefully. If we want to look into the future, this is the foundational investment. We're starting to see states, New Jersey, New York, Illinois, Michigan, really start focusing their general fund dollars on what can happen in the near future. And it is a start. It's not enough, obviously, but it is the start that I think we need to get the data that, Oxford School District and others like Ann's will be able to provide with legislators. There's still so much misinformation out there about what electric school buses can and cannot do. We are hearing that, electric school buses can't operate in the cold. And having someone like Ann be able to tell the story of, no, it's fine, like we are able to, transport kids and they operate just fine is great. And we just dropped the first electric school bus in the state of Maine off. We just dropped the first electric school bus in the state of Tennessee off. We have, I think, a handful more going to Minnesota. We have some in Missouri. We have some in Illinois. So when we have all this data that we're able to present, it really, takes away that off ramp that legislators have in terms of not wanting to fund electric. And when we have advocates that are, similar to the ones that are on the chat, that are educated and motivated, and we could activate them as to why this, is a wise investment, and not just for transportation, but for community health and health equity, access, and making sure that we're building the jobs of tomorrow. We have this very robust argument. I think I saw Beth talking about, what the districts that contract with transportation companies are thinking. And I think they're all in. They are doing the math, and for them as large fleet operators, they see the return on the investment. They see the savings that are going to be happening for them on the long run. And they see this as a partnership in terms of establishing, a new manufacturing kind of industry in the country. We were just on a presentation with First Student for the state of New Jersey, and they were talking about how they look at, transitioning a huge portion of their fleet to all electric. We are just partnered with transportation companies in Canada to make sure that, most of their fleet is going to be all electric very soon. I think there is a will from everybody that has an opportunity to get behind the bus. And, similar to what Ann was saying, when you experience it, you kind of see why it is the next step in school transportation. Where we don't have the way as clearly defined yet is in the funding. And we'll do on our manufacturing side our best to bring down the cost and to reduce that differential. But we're going to need, those that are elected to really buy in and to provide the long-term funding and financing options so that school districts can do what's right and get these buses into communities and get kids on clean school buses.
Can I add something? The more districts that we can get involved and get getting electric school buses in their fleets, just will diminish the issues, the range issues that we talked about before. So not only with parks, but if other school districts have electric chargers, and we're going from district to district to district, then it just make it so much easier to, for everybody involved to be able to recharge if necessary. So that would be amazing.
That brings up another good point, Anne, about the additional benefits beyond the immediate health benefits of electric school buses, and that's the educational opportunities that they provide. We've all heard about and are excited about the growth in STEM education in this country. And I know that one of the things that's been thought about in Michigan is how the school buses, as part of MATT's program, are also serving an educational purpose. Could you speak a little bit to that?
We had a couple of our elementary schools with their green teams. When we first received our buses, we were able to take their students on a small ride on the electric bus and discuss about electric vehicles with their green teams and what they're doing at the elementary level. I know that our curriculum director here at Oxford Schools is directly involved with the other directors here in Michigan as well regarding the STEM projects and getting those projects and getting these electric buses involved. I know Mr. Weaver is very involved in that. I'm not sure, I'm not like in on that real tight, but I know he's directly involved with the power companies and the other districts that are involved.
And education happens at all ages. Orville, you might want to address, if you could, I believe that it's true that some of these federal pieces of legislation, as well as some of the efforts in the state level, like currently in Illinois, also deal with worker retraining and training people of beyond K to 12 on some of the aspects of electric vehicles and electric vehicle infrastructure. Could you touch on that?
Yeah, I can. And the training does start K to 12. We just had an electric school bus last week at a high school in Maryland, and we brought STEM classes out to, take a look under the hood, even though it's not an engine, but to take a look at it, to hear, from us as professionals in a manufacturing company, like what it means for the industry, and then to ask a lot of questions. And I think what we're seeing is that there is such opportunity for like a workforce development growth. And most of these like younger generations are very familiar with electric vehicles because, either their families have one or someone down the street has one. And so they're our most knowledgeable client base, and they're probably going to be, my boss someday. But we are seeing, a lot of opportunities at junior colleges, for us having a manufacturing facility being built in Joliet. We have a great conversation going with Joliet Junior College about what this could mean for training on the manufacturing side. My goal is to make sure that we have parents building the buses, the electric buses that their students ride on, not just in Illinois, obviously, but they should be able to be trained to be, maintenance workers, to be technicians. There are great amounts of jobs that we could do retraining for with, minimal kind of educational experience or requirements. And it is really a very much wide open field. And all that really needs to happen for those that are interested is they need to have a desire, and they need to be ready to, learn something new every day, is what I kind of say, because there's always going to be something with electric vehicles and the technology that's available, and that's going to be coming down the pipeline that is really going to be a first generation knowledge base.
Indeed, we're all learning on this every day. One of the things that I think it would be great for our listeners to hear is that there's already support among some of the legislators here in the Midwest for the kinds of efforts that Anne is doing in Michigan and Orville is working on across the country, as are we here at ELPC, which is support for funding to make this transition. As Orville mentioned earlier, there's the key pending infrastructure bill right now. And that's the one that we're hopeful for will happen very soon, if this week or soon, or very soon. But there are also efforts at the state level. And so I'd like to encourage all who are on this call to reach out to your legislators at the state level and Congress, as well as letting your local school districts know about these potential federal funds and state funds that are still available through VW, and urge your school officials to take advantage, to learn about this opportunity, to help make this transition happen. We have time for maybe one or two more questions for our panelists, which we really appreciate your time. So I wondered, Orville, could you speak to what you think listeners could do? And actually, I'll address this question to both of you. What do you think listeners could do to help get more electric school buses serving the children where they live?
Yeah, I think, the best politics is the one that's right outside your door. And so if you don't know who your elected representatives are at the city, like council level, or at the county level, or at the state level, please get to know them and write to them and make sure that they know as a constituent that you are interested in electric school buses and you want, your local school district to have the funds available. A lot of it is, unfortunately, most politicians still don't know that there are electric school buses available and that they are in their backyard. You'll be surprised at how many elected officials I tell at the congressional level and at the state level that, hey, did you know that so-and-so school district is operating an electric school bus and can go up to 125 miles, 155 miles, and takes kids to school safely every day for the last X amount of years, and their minds are blown away. They had no idea that this technology was available and available right now and has been in their communities. So, if you know about a school bus in your district, please help educate those that are in positions of power to provide more funding. And if you don't have a school bus that's in your district, double down and make sure that those elected officials know who you are and that they know that this is an issue that is really important to you, and make sure that they hear it constantly, because we shouldn't have, next generations of kids riding in school buses that are outdated when we have the technology available to give them a clean and safe experience.
Thanks.
I would like to add, although we were the pilot project in Michigan through MAPT, it doesn't mean we have to be the only program in Michigan. I would like to see other districts, get together and form another program or an additional program, or, even if, just to get it out there and make it happen, do it as a group rather than as an individual district.
Great. Well, I'd like to thank both Anne and Orville for joining us today and for being leaders, bringing electric school buses to our communities. Thank you for everybody who joined. Thank you for your questions. We'll sort through, and if we missed any, we'll get back to you later. We will be sending out the recording of this event and additional resources on the issue. So please keep an eye out for an email from us, and watch for future ELPC Thinks. Thank you all and have a wonderful day.
Thank you.